everyone. Just a quick little logistics intro here. We are recording. We are also in the Zoom meeting format, so you can unmute, but we ask that you do not. We ask that you stay muted during the presentation. If we have time for questions and answers at any point, you can put them in the chat and we will get to them as soon as we're able to. But otherwise, I will hand it over to Eric for our introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Erin, and welcome again to day two. We wanted to start with a welcome from Assistant Commissioner Darren Cordy. So we've asked him to come join us and give a couple of thoughts about the past year and a welcome. So Darren, thanks for joining us this morning.
Of course, thanks, Eric, and thank you all for joining us today. Wish we could all be there in person. I could see your smiling faces, but we'll make the best of it here virtually, and hopefully next year we'll be back to in person. So first of all, I just wanted to say on behalf of Commissioner Mueller, I welcome you to the PBIS Summer Institute. Commissioner Mueller wishes that she could be here today, but unfortunately, she is stuck in budget negotiations with the legislature. Although we are hoping that is successful, I think that we all are confident that we're going to have a budget deal done here in the next few days. So happy that she's able to work on that, but I know that she really wanted to be here so she could send her best and be sure that you all know how much she believes in the work that you all are doing. PBIS has been one of the most successful agency and school partnerships that MDE has ever worked with or seen. PBIS is basically the blueprint for effective implementation and scaling up of statewide evidence-based best practices in Minnesota. And even though this work has been in place for a while now, the fundamentals of PBIS are more important than ever today. And you can see the emphasis on this work in both the governor's Due North plan, as well as the MDE's strategic plan, and the focus on equity and safety, as well as reducing discipline disparities and ensuring students are having a successful and safe and nurturing school experience. Students have suffered just unimaginable trauma in the last year between COVID-19, the law enforcement killings of people of color, the accompanying social unrest, distance learning, and the associated disconnectedness that students felt from their peers. Our colleagues at the Minnesota Department of Health have pointed out that children who lived through this pandemic have basically added a new adverse child experience to their lives, or an ACE. And all that trauma, as you know, is going to manifest itself in behaviors. And it's our job as leaders in the education community to ensure that the response to those behaviors is positive, that it's productive, it's supportive, and it's nurturing, that it's not punishing, it's not discipline focused, it's not dismissive, and most importantly, it's not re-traumatizing. But speaking of trauma, I also want to acknowledge the trauma that you and all other educators in this state experienced in the difficult circumstances of the last year. Between the stress of the pandemic and everything else going on in the world, the concern that you all had for your students, the concern you all had for your own family, and the concern for the future of education. But in light of what we saw, in light of everything that happened, we saw some really amazing creativity and successes and a lot of new experiences that we can learn from, and I think really revolutionize and revitalize the education that students receive, knowing all the new tools that we have in place. So I'd like to congratulate all of you, as well as all of your colleagues, for navigating this unprecedented year. Also wanted to focus on the importance of selecting and implementing evidence-based and effective practices and committing to them over time in district and school improvement plans. As we continue to focus on long-term planning, and as the legislature continues to focus on that as well, through initiatives like World's Best Workforce, School Improvement, CEIS, ADSIS, MTSS, the importance of using and scaling up evidence-based practices and really implementing them with fidelity has become more important than ever. And I think that you're seeing this reflected too in the federal surplus money that we've gotten in the American Rescue Plan, and the emphasis that exists there around evidence-based practices. So the work that you all are doing here in PBIS, I think, could really be translated to other colleagues in the profession, and really hoping that we can learn from the experiences that you all have shown us to help other school improvement efforts across the state. And the other importance of this work is just how effective implementation over time can really help support equity and improve results. We've seen this through PBIS, that we've done this long enough that we have the data to show that effective implementation of a program such as this really does have the evidence that shows improved results. And we know that we need to improve results. We've been sitting with a stagnant achievement gap around the MCAs for decades now. We have seen improvements in graduation rates, but not closing the gap in the way that we would like to be doing. And so if we really need to make changes, because we're going to have to make changes, there are lawsuits pending. There is going to be in Office of the Legislative Auditor audit over the next few years about the achievement gap. And we really need to start looking at the work that we're doing and how we can do it differently, and using evidence-based practices to make sure that that we're achieving the results that we really need to achieve, and we need to achieve them faster than we are achieving them now. So with that, I will leave it at that and pass it back to Eric. And I just, again, want to thank you all for the work that you're doing, and congratulations, especially to the exemplar schools. And again, on behalf of Commissioner Mueller and this administration, thank you for the work that you're doing. Congratulations on making it through the school year and all the successes that you've had. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of this summit and a wonderful summer. Take care.
Thank you, Darren. That really sets a great context for our work, and took several of the things I was going to support and reinforce as well, in terms of just the remarkable work and innovation and the inspiration that we've all drawn from the work that schools, teachers, and teams have made. Just a remarkable time, and so happy that you can join us today as well. So with that, we'll get into a little bit, just some opening context for day 2. Next slide, Tamara. We welcome you back again with those blue skies in summer. We very much appreciate having the time and being able to do this. Again, as a reminder, we're recording the sessions and we'll make them available and posted. So if you need a refresher on, some of the ideas, or if there's a session you weren't able to attend that you'd like to because of the same time, again, know that the sessions will be accessible and are available in the not too distant future. Next slide. Again, as Darren said, we really are focused on equity, and the ones that we are going to emphasize throughout today's agenda. We actually, I think we'll hit all of these through the content of the day, but the 3 we really wanted to highlight as we start was prioritizing equity, valuing people, and improving conditions for learning. And as Darren said, never before have these conditions, a supportive environment, a positive environment, been more important, and will continue to be as we plan and return to school in the fall. Next slide. A little bit of context, and these numbers change so rapidly. If you've been here in past years, the pattern is remarkable and looks the same, but it is a remarkable growth and trajectory. And as Assistant Commissioner Cordy mentioned, we're learning a lot as a state agency and what it takes to not only get started, like we did back in 2004, 2005, 2006, but to keep this going over time and supporting school teams that really are dynamic, that experiences changes in district priorities, staff, and others. It's one of the reasons we take so much pride in seeing the exemplar schools recognized in districts for the work they do to support this. And the getting started part is exciting and important work, but keeping this going over time is really the opportunity to see the benefit for students on an ongoing basis. Next slide. Again, you can see the numbers that are there. I know we have some numbers people in the crowd too, and you can see really how it changes. It's, back in that first cohort year, we had 3 districts, 79 schools that participated. So the way that has built over time, we now see 274 districts across our state, which represents 55% of them have at least one school who has participated in training. We have a total of 821 schools that have come through the cohort training, which represents 39% of the schools in Minnesota. And those schools serve 378,097 students at last count. So we like to update these every year because they really do change over time, and it's a remarkable number. You know, this is really a collaborative effort that builds from classrooms to schools, schools to districts, districts to regions, regions to the state. And as we really look at that, you know, it's just overwhelming to see the collective work that happens. There are many times where we feel isolated and disconnected in the work. We want to really emphasize the partnerships that make this all possible. Trainers, coaches, regional implementation projects, providing that support consistently over time to help this continued scale happen. So next slide. This is just a slightly different breakout. You can see the build of the schools, but we often get the question of how many elementary schools, how many secondary, how many ALCs and special ed programs. So we have the breakout there, as you can see. Again, this is not totally uncommon because there are a lot more elementaries than secondary schools, but you see that mix across the way. And we're super excited to see them, as you'll see in a moment, both in the participants of this institute as well as the exemplars that we'll see later today. One thing we really wanted to emphasize is really, you know, how amazed and we've just been cheering and supportive of the sheer number of schools with so many competing demands that we're able to take the time to do a fidelity measurement this year. And it's important for a number of reasons. One is when you have very volatile conditions like we've experienced, it is entirely not uncommon that that's going to have an impact on the ability to deliver the core features of PBIS in the school. And as Assistant Commissioner Cordy highlighted in the opening, you know, again, like having those predictable, safe, structured environments and supports in place for students is very important. So it is not a surprise that you see an impact and change, but that we had 264 cohort schools complete a TFI in this last year was just an amazing number to us. We've had actually 53 non-cohort trained schools that did a TFI this school year and have used that for their planning and implementation. Many in districts that you'll see in the exemplar school that have a mix of cohort and non-cohort trained schools within their district, but that's a really cool and rising number for us as well. And then the bottom one, you really see that repetitive nature of using fidelity measurements over time to make improvements, to try things, to layer on a new support or an intervention, and see that the impact that it's making in building out those advanced tiers as well. I think about the importance of improvement cycles. Many times people use the word like a plan, do, study, act cycle. Yesterday, Dr. LaSalle used revise, review, and retool. So there are a number of models, but we really think this is critical information to really fuel those improvement cycles, to follow the innovation and the next things that people feel compelled to try, and to come back and see the effect of what effect it had and how it helped strengthen that implementation. Next slide. So who is here at the Summer Institute? We are so pleased to see that we have representation across all of the regions of the state. We have a representation from schools that have been cohort trained and on, you know, the ones that haven't participated in cohort training and are here to learn and share what they're learning and what their implementation looks like as well. We have some schools that are attending because they're interested in learning more about and potentially starting PBIS in their schools. We have a range of general education and special education staff. We have teachers, administrators, related service staff, paraprofessionals, and we see the age ranges of those served from pre-K all the way through transition programs. So we have a nice broad representation in the group that's attending today. Next slide. So a couple things, just, you know, one thing I've always appreciated is the collective and shared wisdom across the community, and like in general, that's true. And then when we rolled up our sleeves to get into PBIS work, how much we really appreciated learning from other states, other districts, regions, schools telling us what they're doing. So we asked the exemplars some questions of what what is an example of something that you're most proud of within this past year related to your PBIS efforts? And a couple of things really rose to the top. One that we saw, motivating, recognizing, and collaborating with staff, students, and families during hybrid, distance, and fluctuating learning models. And that is a lot to manage. We hope that the framework really helped provide an opportunity to have some of those conversations, but that is an amazing juggling act. And again, we're so inspired by the work that we've seen and has been shared with us. The second one is creating a behavior matrix, consistency in implementing PBIS and using data in school-wide celebrations. And I would say, again, the inspiration we've seen from adaptive behavior matrix to address hybrid or distance learning, how they're doing that, the importance of continuing to do celebrations in a time like this, all are fantastic examples. We saw one response that they were proud of being recognized as a sustaining exemplar. So that was great. We'll see more of those here shortly, later this morning. We saw a positive impact on student behavior and reduced referrals and negative behaviors. We saw a response saying equity training and work. And again, we're super pleased to see this highlighted in the applications and also the sharings of many of the exemplar schools and districts. We saw school-wide celebrations and recognition, parades, acts of kindness, postcards home, color runs, fundraisers, a number of them just being important. And we saw the improved TFI scores. And again, being able to produce that result in the conditions that we've had for this past year is remarkable. And we applaud those schools and the exemplars. Next slide. A couple other quick ones to highlight, implementing Tier 1 and Tier 2 during a pandemic. And again, as Assistant Commissioner Cordy said, never before have these been more important. And as we've learned about, a new lens to really view issues related to equity and inequity and access, it's really important to use the tools and the frameworks that we have to go back and help address those. We saw students with disabilities being engaged with programming and taking the next steps to becoming successful and build independent adults. Staff and student determination, putting SEL and mental health first. Again, this past year has been a great opportunity to really elevate those issues. And then I love this last one as well, that staff were creative, inclusive, fun, and resilient. And I think those are all great words and remarkable, and we don't take for granted the time, effort, and energy it took to bring those sides forward in a time like this. Next slide. So we asked our Summer Institute registrants the things about what they were most proud of in this past year with their PBIS efforts. And a couple things came to the top. One was during this year, despite the pandemic, the team thrived. They thrived as a team to support distance learning. And again, I think this would have been so hard individually. So to count on a team to help make those adjustments and adaptations, just remarkable. Remaining consistent with the core components of PBIS. Again, it would have been easy to leave at the door the things that you know how to do, but to use them and adapt them in this time has been remarkable. One respondent said they leaned into the Tier 1 systems to navigate distance learning and welcoming students back to in-person learning, which is great. We have teaching and reteaching expectations during the model shifts, which is fantastic strategy, and we saw some great examples. And the way that the team has continued to evolve and modify to meet the needs of staff and students. And that innovation beyond like the base training, the base framework, the comfort of what people knew how to do, to use that to adapt, evolve, and modify, I think is outstanding. Next slide. What specific tips do you have coming from the Summer Institute registrants for helping teams to establish or sustain buy-in? First one was to survey staff and truly listen to the feedback. Second one was initial buy-in requires direct teaching about what PBIS is and what it is not. I love all of these, but this one really spoke to me as well. Make it relevant and make it easy. Make sure that your PBIS team includes staff, students, and community stakeholders that are committed to establishing PBIS on a long-term basis. Establishing a solid PBIS team was critical to establishing that buy-in. keeping everyone involved each step of the way, having feedback loops, sharing data, and having staff involved in making decisions. And this was a nice way to wrap this slide too, but always bring it back to the kids. A couple others, questions. What questions do you have for helping your team sustain PBIS efforts from Summer Institute registrants? And again, we encourage this. I know some of these have been touched on and addressed in presentations. Others, we encourage that community to kind of make connections as well. But the first one was buy-in in all caps. And, you know, I love that one because the buy-in is a requirement of getting started, but buy-in needs to be revisited time and time again as these efforts go on and is key to sustaining those efforts. Second was ways to dive deeper into Tier 1 core components so that buildings don't start to see Tier 1 as a rote response. How do we reset our PBIS efforts when we've gotten far off track from our original implementation? How do we reach out to parents of color and educate and get their buy-in with PBIS? How to pick up pieces and support our school after this difficult year, and how to continue to grow without feeling the need to change everything. Yeah, some great thoughts and questions, some that have been touched upon, some that will continue to be explored. We wanted to highlight a couple of things that we have up as resources, and I know these have been widely used throughout the year. We thought about one of the gifts for us is really think about the use of technology and creating webinars that can be used live in person, but also access after. So we wanted to highlight a couple that really have been widely used this year in case you don't know that they exist or that you can go back and connect with them as well. But we had one done by Dr. Clay Cook at the University of Minnesota, organized around 5 practically good ideas for any reality. And it really focused on the emphasis of really practical, doable strategies that fit within the PBIS framework and how you would adapt them for in-person, distance, or hybrid. It's a great reminder not to leave at the door those things that are really helpful and think about what are those simple adaptations to make them effective and doable within the various learning environments. So again, that's a great one and got a lot of hits throughout the year. Next slide. There's a great resource that is as relevant today as the day that this rolled out the door last year, but is all around returning to school after a crisis. And again, thinking about how to organize those systems and supports. Brandy Simonson did a great job presenting that, connecting with a lot of national center resources and a couple of different national technical assistance centers collaborating to think about how to prepare and doing that. Again, the emphasis on doable and how to connect that with work that has been ongoing was fantastic. And, you know, again, with all these, highly recommend them. They're still posted at the links that are on there and very relevant today as well. Next slide. Check in, check out. Dr. Kevin Filter from Minnesota State University of Mankato really did a nice job of thinking about that as an evidence-based Tier 2 intervention and how to make that adapted in hybrid or distance learning. Again, for just those core features of check in, check out and how it fits with other programs, it's a great resource as well. So I encourage you to check that out if that's of interest to you as well. A couple of things, Darren referenced this earlier, but as the American Rescue Plan comes out, there is an infusion of time-limited funding. So the National PBIS Center has developed a number of resources really to think about kind of what to do. And oftentimes it really starts a scramble of like sorting out and organizing what the possibilities are and what we're going to choose at a school or a district level. There really are some nice considerations in the guidance that are coming out, so I encourage you to check that out. I think it's not, you know, necessarily new to groups like those that are attending, those of you attending the Institute today, but starting with the data to really identify need, selecting and committing to an evidence-based practice or practices that you think will impact change, particularly within the time limits of the current funding that's available, and focusing the majority of funds on strengthening your current systems. And that's really relevant for this group as you think about, you know, expanding Tier 2 or Tier 3 supports, going back to re-strengthen Tier 1 supports as well. So as we think about that balance and mix, with the head start that you already have, it's much easier to strengthen, expand, and adapt that way than it is to start a new initiative from scratch with a 2-year funding time limit. So great considerations in there, and a new resource we encourage you to check out. So I think I just covered most of those that are there. The slides will be posted and available too. There are other things there that, again, we just want those considerations as people are thinking about what are those strategic opportunities with short-term funding that's coming down the road. Next slide. So as we kind of get to this part of June and we're embarking on hopefully bringing down the busyness of this last year, recharging the batteries and getting ready for the next year, I really want to encourage, again, people take the time that they need to attend to themselves personally, professionally, the teams that they work with and support, to make sure that we're grounded, connected, and recharged kind of moving forward. It has been a remarkable last 15, 16 months, and we have a journey in front of us as well. I really applaud all of you that were able to muster the time, patience, energy to come together to share what you're doing, to put together exemplary applications, to present. Our presenters here are outstanding, and thank you for each of you to step up and do this in the midst of a time where sometimes, it's hard to do one more thing. So we really have strength in community, and hopefully you see and experience both today through the Institute and in the days ahead as we prepare for transition back as well. So thanks, and I hope you enjoy day 2 of the Institute. Aaron or Tamara, do you want to talk about logistics with the break and then the sessions that follow?
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you.
So for right now, there is a break until 9:25, and during that time, you can choose which session you would like to attend. The same link here that you are in right now will have the adult student panel Q&A from Bloomington Transition Center. And the other link will have the film festival and PBIS strategies with a video. So you can choose which one of those you want to attend and go to those. Thanks.